What's happening, Elevation Nation? Man, I'm pumped for this conversation. This has been on the books for some time now. We have Alex Feinberg. I'm going to let him talk about what he's up to. But when I met Alex a couple months back, I was like, Sam, we found another incredible human being that we got to get into the nation. And I cannot wait for this conversation and share your story, Alex, but also how you're helping other people, you put it on your LinkedIn, create unfair advantages. So we're pumped to get into it. Alex, welcome to Elevation Nation, brother.
Thanks, Parker. I'm excited to be here.
Alex, I'm even more hyped because, as you can tell, Parker talked you up. So no pressure or anything, but I've been really excited to meet you and chat with you and learn from your perspective. So we're going to get into things. I want to give you the opportunity, though, to level set with Elevation Nation. Obviously, Parker and I have done some research on you, but can you give us a little elevator pitch? Who are you, man?
Yeah, so right now I help mostly male executives perform at their peak, both mentally, financially, spiritually. And the reason why I'm uniquely qualified to do this is my career started as a professional athlete where I worked tirelessly as a teen and young adult to get a scholarship to play baseball at Vanderbilt University. I got drafted by the Colorado Rockies. I was all things baseball, but I was also reasonably observant when I was an economics major at Vanderbilt. I was always paying attention to how people got edges, always paying attention to how rules were asymmetrically enforced for some people and other people. And I thought that if I wanted to be the most successful person that I could be, I had to really understand the human condition and really understand why Derek Jeter could get away with joking around before games, but a rookie couldn't. And why joking around before games and doing something counterintuitive might allow him to play at his peak. And he's allowed to do that because he's winning. And so I was always paying very close attention to why things worked a little bit differently than the way they were explained. After my baseball career ended, I worked at a global macro hedge fund before elevator pitching my way into Google. Spent 6 years working in sales, corporate strategy, product partnerships at Google. Saw an opportunity to join the cryptocurrency space in 2018, joined an exchange, one of the largest international exchanges from the early days in 2014, joined them in 2018, realized that if I wanted to have any lasting power in that industry, I needed to build a social media following. And so I did that unsuccessfully in 2018, but more successfully in 2019 onwards, first focusing on the diet hacks that I realized could be practiced by not just me, but a lot of athletic men to eat pizza, burgers, fried chicken, and tacos every meal of every day, basically, without counting calories and going hungry and staying shredded year round. So that was my first successful entrepreneurial venture. But obviously going off on my own, leaving corporate America, I had a ton of insight and a ton of understanding of, how people could get better results for less effort. And so my business has morphed from simply helping people transform their bodies to also helping them transform their mind, their lives, everything that they want to get better.
I mean, I can't wait to get into this conversation. This is going to be a fun one. It sounds like, at least from your professional career, you've always been, I guess with collegiate being an athlete as well, like you've always been in very high performing environments, right? You're top of the top when it comes to your sport. You're in, as high performer of teams as you can be. Then you're in the Googles of the world. You're in the best in class businesses of the world. I'm curious, like from those experiences, is there one piece of those cultures that made you realize along the way that you just like weren't going to settle to be like the 99% like other people of the world, that you were always going to be like a top performer?
So it's actually interesting because I always wanted to be the best at everything that I did. And then when I found myself in these elite cultures, probably like the third time it happened when I went to Google. So first time being Vanderbilt baseball player, SEC player, second time being professional athlete, third time being Google employee, were these very upper echelon groups. You realize that half the people there are completely interchangeable with people who didn't make it in. And so from the outside looking in, you're like, oh, wow, this guy's part of this group. He must be a really high performer. And then you're actually part of the group, and maybe it's the high performer in me. I look around and I'm like, half of these people are very average, and half of them are actually very above average and immensely talented and immensely capable individuals. And I like to think that my advantage in life is I'm not a specialist, I am a generalist. I've always been able to be one of the last picks to get included in these teams because my profile never fit exactly with what the hiring manager or the coach wanted, but they knew that I worked hard. They knew that I was good enough. They knew that I would add something from a cultural standpoint. And then when I was able to leapfrog into these elite institutions, I could learn from the upper half of the individuals who were talented and just completely change the way that I looked at success, life, and the world around me. And not to say that these people are better than everybody else because, they're human, they're mortal, they make a lot of mistakes, but it always has been, tremendously advantageous for me to surround myself with very high performing individuals so I can get the most out of myself.
I love that answer because, to be perfectly honest, Alex, that is why we started Elevation Nation. I'll give you a brief backstory, and folks out there that have heard the podcast before know this, but Parker and I graduated from the University of Maryland together, and we like to say we did everything right. I'm doing air quotes for people that are just listening. We were tour guides on campus, in a fraternity, getting good grades, internships. Parker started a company, doing all the things that our parents were very proud of us for. And we graduated and got jobs in Big Four consulting. Like, everyone thought we had made it and super impressive, and we thought we did too. And I'll never forget moving to New York City, becoming a young adult, and getting out of bed got harder and harder. And for the first couple months, I thought, okay, I'm just, not used to having to wake up early. And college classes started at 10. I just got to give my body time to adjust. And then I realized I wasn't even making it to the gym. I wasn't even giving myself time to meditate. And I wasn't motivated to go to work. And at that point, I realized that I was suffering from depression, was not happy with who I was not happy with where I was living, was not happy with the job that I was in. Yet everyone told me I had made it. Everyone told me I'd worked my butt off my entire life, high school, college, to get to this point, and now I'm here. And I was staring down the barrel of another 40 years at a company doing work that did not bring me fulfillment or joy, and I went, oh my gosh, what the heck did I just waste my life doing? Why am I not happy anymore? And so really what we did with Elevation Nation, to be perfectly honest, Alex, it started as a ploy. Parker and I wanted to talk to other people that had their shit figured out because we felt extremely lost as a young person. If we as high performers felt lost, felt unsatisfied with the work we were doing, we thought maybe we could learn from someone else. And I think learning from other people is so underrated, I think. We like to often, maybe this is just some macho men or thinking that we always know the right answers, but yet there's so much we can learn from other people by maybe just empathizing with them, their situation, and actually opening up our perspective instead of going in thinking we know best. So I love that, and I'm so excited that that's how you learned as well.
Well, look, I would know nothing were it not for very highly intelligent mentors who saw something in me when I was younger to see it worth their time to guide me. Because I had my ideas and understandings of how the world worked when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, and they were all wrong. One thing that I had to my advantage is they gave me an internal locus of control. And so happy people, successful people tend to have internal loci of control, meaning they think that their hard work will result in some sort of positive benefit. That's what you want to look for in a young person, somebody who has a reasonably high IQ, who's reasonably socially aware, who is confident that his hard work will yield success. His actual views at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old can be completely wrong, as mine were. But if you have those three things, or even two of those three things going to your advantage, you're probably going to do okay.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because I mean, Sam and I talk about this all the time, that we think, especially among young people, it's almost more difficult to hone in on that exact point that you're trying to make, where someone can really feel as if what they are doing or what they want to do would make an impact in the world or make an impact in that in your own life. What is one exercise or tip that you do when you work with your clients to help them bring to light those ideas?
The more you can work on your own thing, the more fulfilled you're going to be. And I can tell you that when I was working at Google, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Everybody saw what you saw on my resume. Oh, he was a professional athlete. He's working at Google. It's the most desirable company to work for in the United States. He has a high profile view doing sports and media partnerships, gets to go to the ESPYs, gets to go to the MTV VMAs, flying to New York, flying to LA, doing all this cool stuff that can be posted on Instagram. But the reality was I was working for somebody else, working on products that I didn't think were that great. And what I'm doing right now is I'm helping people live better lives, whether it's helping them get a body they never thought they could have, or live with less anxiety than they thought that they could, reasonably live with. And, on a monthly basis, I'm hearing back from multiple people telling me how much I was able to impact their lives. And you want to know how many times I heard that in the 6 years that I was working at Google? It was 0 times. Nobody had ever told me,
Wow.
Just thank you so much for helping get us set up on this AdWords campaign, or thank you so much for creating the products that power the news on the Google Assistant. Like, nobody cares about what you're doing at a large company. Maybe if you're building rockets or something like that. But, if you're not working at SpaceX, like, nobody really cares. You're not really changing people's lives working at a large company. And so, of course, you're going to feel a little bit depressed, like you're some cog in a machine, because you're so far removed from the actual benefit of the people that you're helping out. Your job is just to perform to some, financial executive's rubric that he created to make sure that they're not paying you too much. If you think very deeply about it, they're just trying to design a incentive system to keep you marching along the same lines, but not so fast that they have to pay you more. And if you just pay attention to it too much, you'll get depressed because you realize that you're kind of in a prison. But most of the people who haven't left yet haven't figured that one out.
That point resonates with me a lot. And I think that's how I felt at 22 when I realized no matter how hard I work, this thing to get to the top is very time boxed and very constrained with the upside. And that realization hadn't really happened before. I think in high school it was, well, the goal is to get into the best school I can get into with as much money to help make sure I don't have a lot of debt. And there were different variables there, but the ceiling was pretty high. And then it was in college, well, what is the best job, most high-paying job I can get in an industry that I find very interesting? And then once you're finally in that system, you can get, how we do it at our company, it's out of 4. You're a 1 through 4. And that's it. That's the highest you can get. And there's X amount of dollars that come with that. And then you get promoted to the next year. And maybe every couple years you get promoted to that next level. And so that ladder was so just apparent to me that it maybe as a high performer, maybe as a depressed young person in a new city, I don't know what the combination was, but I truly, Alex, I remember calling Parker and going, dude, do you also feel like this? Like, we were great. We were kings of campus in College Park, Maryland, loving life. Everyone knew us. No one cares about our opinion anymore. What are we doing? Why are we here? And I think more and more young people, for better or for worse, I think it's for better, with social media, with LinkedIn, with all this stuff, this knowledge out there, they're realizing the path to success, the path to the American dream, the path to fulfillment that worked for my parents and my grandparents probably isn't going to bring me fulfillment anymore. And that's why I think our generation is at this weird reflection point. Where and how do we find our American dream? So I'm curious, Alex, for you, with some of the men that you're working with, they are top performers in their industries. Some of them might feel locked into the jobs that is paying for their fancy vacations and nice cars. Mm-hmm. How are you helping them figure out how to balance their bills with the fulfillment that I think every person really wants?
Well, you have to realize that money is simply a tool. And what's really interesting, I don't know how many conversations you guys have had with people who've gone to elite business schools, but elite business schools are like cults, because I know a number of people who are financially set, like they don't need to work, but because they went to elite business schools, they feel less worthy. They feel almost embarrassed if they don't have a title that their classmates envy, irrespective of the fact that they have no financial need to show up and continue working. And so part of my job with the people who have already made it is to help them realize, like, more money is not going to make your life better. You looked at money as a tool to get you certain things that you didn't have, now that tool has actually maximized its utility, and the marginal utility is diminishing, if not negative. So most people live their lives always thirsty, right? They don't have enough money. Their lives would definitely be better if they had a lot of money. But money to a rich person is like water, clean water to you and me. Most people around the world would be incredibly jealous that you and I have access to as much clean water as we want. But if we had access to more clean water, we wouldn't be happier than we are now. We have enough clean water access to fulfill our needs. And so one thing that's very difficult for people is if they spent their entire lives needing more clean water and structuring their entire days and sense of self-worth around getting more clean water, then they found a well that gives them more clean water than they're reasonably going to consume that day, week, month, or year, or that lifetime. They need to shift their goals. They need to shift their understanding of what is important and what is worth striving for. Otherwise, they're actually going to misallocate the thing that is rarer and more precious than the dollars in their bank account, and that's the days that they have left on earth.
It's funny you bring that up, Alex. I was having a conversation last week with someone who just left a company, a small company, where the boss has built up a substantial practice both in the United States, in Europe, and in the Middle East. And this person they have it all, right? They have all of the houses that they want. They got a private jet to be able to fly to those offices. But she was like, I'm leaving this company because my values and principles don't align with this person, because that person always wants more. And she was like, I don't understand how a person who could almost have everything sit there and be like grinding and trying to grow and scale more and want more clients and this and that. Whereas she's like, he can never just stop. And
He's a drug
to
addict.
me, and so to that point, back to my point about what you were just saying, is like, is there a piece of that where it's like, it's just part of biology, where really you can't, it's so ingrained in someone's being to go want more and more and more and go, push towards those, what in this case, $1, that is it almost impossible to really fully change out of someone?
It's impossible to do a complete 180, but it's very possible to make meaningful changes that will alter the course and trajectory of your lives. Basically, most people who grind away all day trying to get more and more and more, their families are broken in every way except for possibly on paper. As I've gotten older and I've spent more time interacting with people who really understand the human mind, a lot of it has to do with their childhood upbringing. And so, a lot of high-performing individuals are basically trying to win the love of their parents that eluded them when they were 6 or 7 years old. And the way that they feel safe is performing at a high level. And so they actually feel very anxious when they're not constantly getting reminders of how good they are, of how powerful they are, of how successful they are. They feel very unsafe walking around in the world where they're not constantly scaling. And so for guys like this, they're actually trying to make up for a lack of love and a lack of bonding hormones by just dumping dopamine into their brains. A lot of them end up with substance abuse issues too, because what their neurochemistry doesn't allow when you're in a stress elevated high cortisol state is it doesn't allow for effective pair bonding. So it's very, very difficult for people like this to have strong relationships with their wives, strong relationships with their kids. And so they go through life severely lacking in serotonin, severely lacking in oxytocin, which are bonding hormones, which are love hormones. And they think they can make up for that lack of well-being by more dopamine, like more winning hormones. And it just never works. But that combination is actually an excellent cocktail to get somebody to be highly productive, because he's constantly unhappy and constantly unsatisfied and thinks that if he can scale the next mountain, that only then will he be able to, sit back, relax, and cherish the wins that he has under his belt.
But that's almost never the case. There's just a new mountain to go climb.
Yeah, because they never fix the underlying issue. Yeah.
So we've asked this question to many elevators that have come on the show, Alex. We call it this elevator mindset. That sounds like you're describing someone who is always looking for more, trying to be a little bit better. And I've asked this. I said, do you think that mindset is a blessing or a curse? And so many people that come on the show say, well, I think that's a blessing. It's gotten me to where I am today. So I want to ask you, with that same thought in mind of what an elevator mindset is, it sounds very similar to what you just described. Do you think it's a blessing or a curse? And did you always have that and then tone it down? Or how have you changed your brain chemistry to adapt to the life that you actually want to live?
It's both a blessing and a curse. And it's a blessing if you have it in moderation, and it's a curse if you have it in excessive moderation. And so, when I was a college athlete, I really struggled to sleep because it was very difficult for me to get my mind off of, the obligation that I had to perform or everything that I had to do the next day. And one of the reasons why I have been able to be as successful as I've been, helping other people take things off their plate, helping other people be more efficient with how they structure their schedules, is I had to go through a complete unbundling process and deconstruction process of my personality through my 20s and early 30s, because the thing that made me as successful as I was tormenting me inside. It was making it hard for me to sleep. It was making me irritable. It was not allowing me to have a quality of life that you would think somebody with my resume would have. And so I decided, do I want a good resume or do I want a good life? And I want a good life. And so in order to have a good life, you need to deconstruct or kill some of the sacred cows that you built your life around. And so if you look at the way I structure my day right now, I don't work as hard as I assumed that I would be working when I was 20 years old. I don't have as much money as I assumed I needed when I was 20 years old. But I work hard. I work hard enough to get what I want, and I have enough to pay for, all of the things, really 95% of the things that I really want. And so it's not like I'm living at, some significant deficit to where I would be if I had $50 million. It just requires a little bit of a different journey for me to get to where I've now decided I really want to go.
I think that's a perfect segue into something that I know you've talked about before, which is the overlap between how you look at finances and your fitness overall.
Yeah.
And so I'd love if you could because I think it's a great comparison, and personal finance and financial literacy is something Parker and I are very passionate about, because I think we both were very lucky that we had families that taught this to us, to the point where until I got into the real world and realized that many young people are not taught this, I thought it was very normal. So I'd love, Alex, to give you an opportunity to share that awesome analogy, and then we can dive into some personal finance stuff.
Yeah. So I think it was John D. Rockefeller who said that most people are too busy working to get rich, or most people aren't rich because they're too busy working. And the corollary on that is most people who are highly dedicated to the gym, like adults, not athletes, but like regular, people with corporate jobs. Most people who work out regularly work out too much to actually get in shape. And what you really want to do if you want to be successful without essentially signing over your soul to the endeavor that you're trying to succeed in, is you need to figure out how you can succeed in your sleep. And so everybody knows that the people who make the most money aren't making money because they're clocking the most hours, or they're earning the highest W-2 incomes. The people who make the most money are making money off of their investments. They're making money literally when they're sleeping. And, the same thing is true with people who are in shape. The people with the fastest metabolisms and best bodies are burning far more calories in their sleep than the average person will burn during the day when he's awake. And so what I realized going through my own personal fitness journey, as well as, building my own wealth, is that most people spend too much time tracking the calories they think they burn in the gym. What that results in is insufficient rest days, workouts that are harder than they need to be, and no stimulus being applied to the body that will teach your mind to alter your own hormonal balance in a way that will add lean muscle and lose body fat. So if you want to add muscle and lose body fat, you need to train at high intensities. But you can't train at high intensities every day, nor can you train at high intensities for multiple hours per day. You may be able to train at high intensities for, a total of 2 or 3 hours per week. And if you cut it down, most of the time in those 2 or 3 hours is spent resting in between hard sets. And so the best workouts you can structure are 2 to 3 hours per week of very hard stuff with, whether you're doing intervals, you're doing 60 seconds in between interval sprints. But if you're doing lifts, you're doing 3 to 4 minutes in between lifts. You need to recover so you can push yourself at a level that you have not pushed yourself before. So your brain sends messages to your skeleton to lose body fat and gain muscle. That is how you can lose fat in your sleep. You're never going to get rich by saving $5 a day on coffee, just like you're never going to have six-pack abs by, I'm going to go get an extra 20 minutes of cardio in. It's like, great, that 20 minutes of cardio does nothing for your resting metabolic rate. If you want to be rich, you need to be earning money in your sleep. If you want to be ripped, you need to be burning fat in your sleep.
I was ready for oh wait, is there any sleep tips that you're going to provide that actually help? Or is it simply you just got to sleep more, rest more instead of go, go, go all the time?
Well, okay, so we could be talking about sleep tips if you want. Get off your screens an hour before sleep, no liquids at least a couple hours before sleep, try to eat your last meal earlier in the day, try to get natural sunlight exposure first thing in the morning, try to not do stimulants the last 12 hours of the day. All these things are going to help. Blue light glasses help. But realistically, it's the mindset shift away from thinking that you're going to get tremendous results by how hard you work and neglecting how hard you're recovering. So I almost look at it like a hitter, like a baseball hitter or a boxer. If you want to transfer as much weight forward, if you want to transfer weight into a punch, if you want to transfer weight into a swing, you need to get your weight on your back foot before you go forwards. Most people's mindset is fixated on just moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. Well, if you're just going here and moving forward, you're not going to hit the ball very hard. If you're just going here, moving forward, you're not going to punch someone very hard. You need to move back before you move forward if you want to get the best results. Just like you need to focus on recovery so that you can train hard. And they're equally important. So most fitness people, because it aligns with misconceptions that people have from watching Hollywood movies, most fitness professionals will convince people or try to play to the misconception that you need to do more. You need to do it harder. You may not need to do more, you may need to do less, but you need to do it harder. And in order to do it harder, you need to be able to take a step back and get that weight on your back foot before transferring it to your front foot.
It's a great analogy. I want to just shout out a book that I don't know if you've read it, Alex. So I don't know if we can get into a debate or discussion about it, but Parker recommended me a book that I just finished called Good Energy. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with the book. I'm familiar with the concept.
Okay. We're gonna have to send you a copy as a thank you gift for joining the nation. Because more so, I'm curious if you agree or disagree with many of the concepts and principles in it by Dr. Casey Means. So we'll save that for maybe another episode or conversation later when we can give you time to dive into it. But it's changed my perspective a little bit on how I feel about health and in my body as well. I think your concept, though, of taking a step back and going forward, the whole time you were saying that, I just thought about how impatient Americans are today. We need the dopamine, we need the solution, we need the answer right now. No, I'm not going to rest. No, I'm not going to go backwards. I want solutions. I want results. So I'm going to keep going and going and going. And I think so many people believe that that is the right answer, not just in fitness, but in their entire life. And so something we preach at Elevation Nation and a concept that we teach in our keynotes around the country is the concept of being introspective and taking a step back for yourself. Mm-hmm. And again, this happened when throughout our entire lives, Parker and I were running, doing what our lovely parents told us to do, what we thought society said was right. And so we kept moving forward, kept doing more clubs, more activities, more extracurriculars, trying to get better grades. And I never actually took a step back to go, who the hell is Sam Panich? And what does he want? What brings him fulfillment? What doesn't actually fill up my cup? What type of people do I want to be around? What do I want to say I accomplished in life? And when we go and talk to these young people, these interns, these new hires at these corporations, these camp counselors, we teach them this concept of being introspective. and it's unfortunate, but great for us because it keeps us employed on the side here, is so many young people are never taught this skill set. And I think it aligns to a little bit of what you were saying. Take a step back and pause and think first and then go. So I'm curious your thoughts there.
Well, it reminds me of an argument that I had with my dad because, I went to an elite university, but don't actually think very highly of the education system because I think the education system actually leaves a lot of very smart people less capable or suboptimally capable of performing because what you're taught in school is about the outside world. And a lot of times when people learn about the outside world, they learn that things are hard, desolate, depressing, and you give up hope. So I really believe that the more you take a smart person and put that smart person into the university system, the more helpless that person will learn to feel about his life and our future as a society. If I were to construct a university curriculum, 50% of it would be about the outside world. This is how physics works. This is how history works. 50% of it would be about how to live with yourself, how to live with the things that are limiting you on the inside. And so most people, if they get obsessed with learning facts, learning data, you'll come up with a reason to say 90% of businesses fail, right? Well, who's going to be in a better position to succeed as an entrepreneur? The person who says 90% of businesses fail or the person who's never heard of that statistic in the first place? Imagine if you didn't have that education and instead you were taught with 50% of your time how to contend with setbacks, like literally had a course on this is how your body will respond to setbacks. Your cortisol is going to go up. You're going to feel burned out. These are narratives that you can tell yourself to have you keep going when the situation feels bleak. And it's worked for all these people in these wars and in history. And it's like, oh, that's actually a functional curriculum that doesn't just teach kids about the outside world, but it teaches people how to navigate the world.
Curious, Alex. I mean, thank you. Just like all these analogies, all like you're just bringing it. It's so interesting. So thank you. And I know Elevation Nation appreciates it a ton, and also Sam. But something too is like, especially around men, I mean, we're talking about getting vulnerable with yourself. We're talking about looking inward. And oftentimes that's the hardest thing that you could ever do, because when Sam and I talk about vulnerability and, becoming authentic with yourself, it's the good and it's also the not so good. And people avoid being truly introspective and self-aware because they don't want to they don't want to look into the not so good. It doesn't feel nice. It doesn't feel great. It may bring you down. And oftentimes I think men in America avoid that because one, maybe there's this stigma, but two, there's that pain or fear that they might get. So I'm curious, what's your pitch to men for why they should become more vulnerable and authentic with themselves?
Well, I actually don't think that everybody should in every context. And so I will never tell somebody, you need to do this now, and this is the reason. There's a reason why the saying goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I only talk to people who are interested in working with me if they're actually interested in working with me. And so if there's limiting areas, like typically the people who I work with are cerebral enough to follow the logical points that I'm making step by step. So I'm not going into my conversations like really hoping to get people to open up with me. But, I can tell people like, look, most people who have childhood situations like this will respond like that. And, that's like a normal way for somebody to start sharing, their upbringing with you. And so if I'm objectively talking about how the human brain works from a performance standpoint, it becomes incumbent upon the person on the other end of the call to share their own experience and also, validate the fact that what I'm saying is resonating with him. So, I don't think that opening up for the sake of opening up is something that I would really push anybody to do. But when it's obvious that something is causing you a recurring problem and will continue to do so unless you fix it, that's really the only time people change. Like alcoholics don't stop drinking because they're alcoholics. They stop drinking because their alcoholism is causing them a problem. People don't go to physical therapy because they want to go to physical therapy. They go to physical therapy because something is bothering them and it's not going away. And so if something has been made clear to an individual that this is not comfortable and it will continue to be uncomfortable until it is addressed, a lot of times people will open up.
It's a very interesting perspective. I think for so long, Parker and I have tried to teach vulnerability as a skill, and maybe we need to rethink, how we maybe go about doing that to not bring up some of that trauma. We actually this year started doing kind of a trigger warning on our keynote before speaking to some students, because we had some walk out and realize, oh my gosh, like to us, because we do this so often, and Parker and I have had a lot of practice being vulnerable, it doesn't feel as emotional. But as we did it with a couple different schools and corporations, a lot of people were unable to handle it. So I think it's a really fair point. I appreciate that perspective. And Alex, I just love how you bring things into analogies and ways for people to understand. So I want to move us into our next section here. You're a baseball guy. We call this rapid fire. So we're going to throw you some fastballs down the middle here, man. I'm hoping you can hit some home runs. This is a new one that I'm just adding to our list here because I wanted to ask you and I didn't get a chance to. We talked a little bit about the higher education system, learning in the United States. If you had a kid coming through, graduating from high school, what would you tell them to do for their higher education? And I'm sure it was probably maybe not the normal path you took. So I'm curious if you have a different perspective here.
You got to learn how to sell things. So in order to learn how to sell things, you understand buyer psychology. And if you understand buyer psychology, you'll always be able to either get employed somewhere or start your own business. And so, for kids for the last decade, even before AI, for people who didn't know what they wanted to do, I would tell them you should get a job as a headhunter, because if you're a headhunter, you not only learn skills as a salesman, you understand why companies hire certain individuals and what they look for in the individuals whom they hire. And so you understand how things get done and why they get done the way they get done if you're in a headhunting type role. So I think, you got to sell, you got to learn how to get along with people, you got to learn how to read people, or you got to learn how to build, really sophisticated AI tools. And, that's it, because those are going to be the only people who have money in like 10 years.
Okay, fair enough. I'm skipping to our last rapid fire that we do ask every single person, but do you have a book recommendation for Elevation Nation that would help them figure out how to sell more?
Well, I could go to how to win friends and influence people. That's a little bit more old school. It's not going to tell you how to manage a pipeline. But at the end of the day, if you're running a business that is a small business, meaning you're like under $10 million, relationships matter more than anything else. And even if you want to be ultra successful and you need to be able to deliver difficult news to investors, but you want them to continue to believe in you and to continue to invest in subsequent rounds, you need to learn how to develop honest and meaningful relationships with the people who matter. And so I think remembering people's names, a lot of the lessons that Dale Carnegie gets into in How to Win Friends and Influence People, I would recommend, reading that.
You know what? I read that back in like college, and it's on the shelf behind me. And I feel like it's due, Sam, for another read, because College Parker is a completely different human. So, Alex, I appreciate the insight, because I think I'm going to throw that one back on the bedside table.
Our last rapid fire for you, Alex. This one's just a quick one. What is harder to rewire or retrain, the mind or the body?
They're the same. It's the same degree of difficulty, because so when you go through a change period, your mind is protecting itself from movement, just like your body is protecting itself from movement. So the same reason why people are rigid with their thoughts is the same reason why people are rigid with their movements. They're protecting themselves from injury. So if, I look at arthritis isn't just something that happens to your joints, it's something that happens to your mind, where if you have a very fragile worldview that is dependent on you believing a number of things that are not true, when somebody introduces to you a concept that is outside of the scope of your existing framework to understand things, you cannot contend with it. It's like asking somebody who has very poor hip mobility to, move his right foot, 2 feet to the side. It's like, it's just not going to move. And the reason it's not going to move is because he's going to get hurt if it moves out there. Your muscles, your ligaments have not been trained to move the way you want them to if you have an arthritic joint. And so your body is protecting itself by keeping yourself tight. So both the body and the mind are wired to conserve energy. This is something that I realized a few years ago, where you believe things that are wrong in large part because your mind is trying to save energy, conserve energy from what it would take if you believed it was right. That's why a lot of people think that a business idea is not going to work. It's not because they objectively think it's not going to work. It's because it will require a huge investment of their energy if they think that it's possible. And so the brain will always try to convince you to not expend that extra energy, just like it will try to convince you to not run that extra mile or not do that extra sprint or not do that extra rep. And so once you learn how to train the body, you end up learning how to train the mind. And I think a lot of the training that I did as an elite athlete was really helpful for me when I wanted to train my mind. And so I'll give you an example. When I was training to be a Vanderbilt athlete, to be an SEC athlete, professional athlete, I was always willing to do something that was physically uncomfortable if it was going to make me better, if it was going to make me a better player. When I had my first job working for a hedge fund manager, he wanted me to read what at the time would be considered conspiracy theory content. Read about the origin of the Federal Reserve, read about the origin of the US government in the 20th century. And it was very uncomfortable because it called into question a lot of foundational truths or fictions that we were taught in school. But rather than say, oh, this is making me feel uncomfortable, I'm not going to learn it, I said to myself, is exposing myself to this information going to make me a smarter person or a dumber person? I owe it to myself. Just like I owe it to myself to go to the gym and get that extra rep in, I owe it to myself to expose myself to this content and to push myself through the discomfort of making the most rational, objective assessment I can to the information. I made the most rational assessment I could with the information, and I decided that it made the most sense for me to move to Silicon Valley because I thought the Federal Reserve was going to keep interest rates low for a long period of time, and it was going to be substantially easier to make a lot of money in Silicon Valley than anywhere else. I decided this in 2010, and I was right. And I think because I was able to push myself through the discomfort of learning something that challenged my worldview, I was able to have success without working nearly as hard as many other people my age.
Alex, you are like the epitome of a concept that Sam and I love to talk about, which is mental fortitude. Pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, whether you know it's going to be for better or maybe for worse, but you're going to learn something or grow from it in some way, shape, or form along the way. So I'm just so grateful that we got connected to you and have, of course, welcomed you to the nation. Before I jump into the last question, how can people find you?
Feinberg 1 on Twitter, now X, Instagram. You can go to feinbergsystems.com if you're interested in maybe working with me. There's a form that you can fill out. But if you just want to hear more of my thoughts, Alex Feinberg 1 on most major social media channels. I post YouTube videos, Instagram Reels, as well as raw thoughts on Twitter on a daily basis. I keep my DMs open right now, so as long as you're not trying to sell me something, I will almost certainly reply to you. Are trying to sell me something, I probably won't reply to you.
But you respect the hustle of them trying to sell and learning to sell. So everyone's got to have that skill.
I did when they were not very numerous. At this point, I do not respect that hustle.
Yeah, there's a lot of it that it's pretty bad, I would say, when you get sold to online. But Alex, I'm sure you're getting a lot more than us. Okay. Last question. We ask every single person who joins Elevation Nation, whether that be through the Elevation Nation podcast or when we speak around the country, thousands and thousands of people have what we call a mental motto. That's a phrase, a slogan that you lead your life by. And so, Alex, it wouldn't be Elevation Nation if we didn't hear your mental motto?
You are blessed, but you are mortal. And so I
Unpack
think
that for us.
Yeah, so I think that in order to succeed, you need to think that you're a cut above everybody else. Like if you have to think that the rules that apply to everybody else don't apply to you if you want to succeed. But you also have to realize that you're mortal because you can take that too far. And so I think that success requires a duality where, sometimes you have to believe contradictory thoughts. You have to go through phases where you have a very inflated ego, and then you have to go through phases where you're very humble. And I think that, bridging the two, you're blessed, but you're mortal, is a good way to encapsulate the duality of success.
Popping off mute there. Man, I love it. It's an incredible mental motto. And I think that'll leave Elevation Nation thinking, at least for tonight. Maybe they can get their sleep, though, because they have to rest. That's important.
Right.
Alex, on behalf of Sam, myself, Elevation Nation, we are so grateful to have you join the nation and just appreciate your time. And Elevation Nation, till next week. Peace.
Thanks.